Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another week of the Meadows and Makers podcast, brought to you here on MSP Waves. My name is Greg Dowd. I am your host. I am also known as Making Stuff on the Steam and Hive communities. Steam and Hive communities. Just a little housekeeping before we get the show started today. This is a really great interview that I had with Watsun Atkinsun, and he is a traveling tattoo artist, a researcher, a philosopher, among many other things. And this was a really great conversation that we get into today about spiritual self-reliance and going through the hero's journey and learning a lot of lessons along the path in life and how traumas can lead to you taking actions in the world to seek truth and move in a positive direction, help reality move in a positive direction. And so, with all that being said, the thing that I need to do up front here is the show disclaimer. The views and opinions that are expressed on this show are my own and those of my guests. They do not reflect on MSP Waves and the people that keep this operation running around here. And so, big thanks to Rondon and all of the MSP community and PAL and everybody that comes here weekly to come check out the show. And I love you guys. Thank you for being here. I'll be here today, and I'll be here to answer questions and talk and drop memes and all that kind of stuff in the chat. And but without further ado, let me cue up this pre-recorded interview I did with Watsun, and I hope you guys enjoy. So thank you for being here, and here we go. All right, so hey everybody, welcome to another week of the Meadows and Makers podcast. I am Greg Dowd, your host, and I'm also known as Making Stuff on the Steam and Hive blockchains. And so today I have with you guys a special guest. His name is Watsun Atkinsun, and he is an artist, and and a researcher, among other things. He has a YouTube channel of the same name, Watsun Atkinsun. We met at Anarchadelphia in 2019, and really fascinating guy, and really interested to getting to know more about him and get to share what his experiences are with the audience today. And so without further ado, how are you, Watsun?
Hello, great to see you again, Greg. We had a good time at Anarchadelphia. Wasn't that a great moment?
Oh man, just so many great people there, and the conversations were just never ending, and just it went way into the night, and just people with all their different little bits of information from all over the place. Just I had one person that came up and we talked, and it was just like, I've never felt more human my entire life, you know?
Absolutely. Just being able to meet a kindred tribe of people that you could speak freely about a lot of these important topics and not feel like an outcast or out of the audience. So it felt really great to have that kind of tribal, or being philosophically kindred with with dozens and dozens and hundreds of people. My favorite moment by far was definitely Mark Passio's lecture on the sacred gift of anger. And just recently that got posted on his What on Earth is Happening website and his YouTube channel under the same name. And it's this really beautiful document on the healing, kind of transcendental, medical, mystical attributes of anger as a powerful emotion that you can use as a productive, kind of proactive force to help move us along on this journey. So I think he was originally going to call it the sacred gift of righteous anger, and then he edited down to the sacred gift of anger just to maybe make it shorter. But anyway, I'm a big fan of getting a little mad in the right context if it's defending truth and love and harmony and community and sovereignty and freedom and true anarchy. So anger is a good emotion, and we shouldn't fall under the the New Age deception that anger is a bad narrative, and especially that's in part referencing years ago when he released that New Age bullshit and the suppression of the sacred masculine series that he was focusing on years ago. But he talks about in that the sacred gift of anger has been suppressed in the New Age community, and they've kind of taken that from us. So Mark Passio overwhelmingly is one of my heroes, and I'm one of my teachers for at least about the last decade or so. I think I've devoured every single lecture he's done. I haven't had the heroic dose and taken in his entire podcast series, but I've taken in a lot. And I know he charges a lot of us to, like, you must take in the entire series, you know, and I've taken in a lot, but I can definitely say I've taken in every lecture he's done.
Wow. Anyway, yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of, yeah, man.
Anarchy, to true anarchy.
Yeah, absolutely.
This info about it, but anarchy as an empowering spiritual tradition for freedom and anti-statist, anti-government control over us. And I think that learning about what true anarchy is helped me on my journey of you know, attempting to unshackle from the tethers of the control matrix.
Awesome. So yeah, just with all my guests and everybody that comes on the show, I like to get into a little bit about who you are and where your background is and what, you know, kind of led you down this journey to going towards anarchy and towards looking into all this information, such as Mark Passio that you just brought up. Yeah,
well, it's hard to, I haven't really kind of spoken at length about my journey, so thank you for that invitation. I was a 70s child. I was born in 1971. So I grew up in the 70s and was a teenager in the 80s. And one of my first memories is actually watching the Vietnam War on a black and white TV during dinner, like in 1972, 73. But it was at a time when the propaganda machine used to inundate the general populace with all this pro-war rhetoric on TV, and I vividly remember watching that as a young kid. So I think in my early psyche, I became aware of politics in the military-industrial complex and the war machine. So when I look back in hindsight at my earliest memory, I can still see that flickering TV broadcasting a lot of the propaganda and social engineering of the you know, during the Vietnam War. So that being one of my first memories is pretty powerful. The second memory I have is, you know, maybe around the same time. Actually, let me take that back. That was my second memory. The first memory was when I was breastfeeding with my mother, and she told me this story later on, and I recollected the memory as my first memory, and it's on the contrary to that, you know, to that oppressive kind of warmongering, flickering TV, you know, fear that was presented to me, you know, at like 2 years old. The memory before that was when my mother had fallen asleep and had kind of like dozed off while she was breastfeeding me. And the story goes on her end that she felt a hand or a finger touch her shoulder, just, you know, tap her on the back of the shoulder and kind of wake her up. And then she realized that I had fallen under her arm and she was suffocating me, and frantically, you know, held me up and shook me and made sure, you know, I was okay. And she had caught me just in time. But her being a spiritual woman and, you know, a being of God and a religious woman, she instantly had this intuition that it was an angel who was watching over her, like a guardian angel who was able to somehow, you know, from the spirit realm, was able to put enough pressure on her shoulder with emotion and care to nudge her enough to wake up. So those two memories are, you know, pretty much the dichotomy of reality in this realm right now. We live in this really complicated matrix of consciousness and being downloaded into this material plane. And we have these two really powerful, ancient, primordial forces, I think, that have probably been around since the first breath of life, and a super dark, evil, diabolical, force that I would associate with the war machine and that television flickering, pushing that horrible moment in time of the Vietnam War. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have, love and light and God and consciousness and care and community. And, so that other force, that positive, beautiful force, I think coming from the source itself, was that spirit or that light being or that guardian angel that tapped my mother and woke her up from her slumber and gave me the ability to continue living. Because if there hadn't have been that force to wake her up, then I would have died in her arms and I wouldn't be here right now.
Wow.
So I think that though there are other poignant moments in my history, those two things kind of gave me this reality check of these polarities and these contrasting elements. These two forces in nature, which I think on a subconscious and on a hyperdimensional sub-reality level, what's really fueling this entire experience are these two, diabolically contrasting forces of love and fear. And I obviously chose love years ago, and I fill my vessel full of light and love and logos. And I refuse to allow the vampire over the doorsill of my body temple. And I've never given permission for the darkness to come into me. So my vessel's full of goodness and care and harmony. And that's in part why I'm here attempting to research and to get a handle on what's happening now, because as Mark Passio mentions, one of the most important forces in nature is care. And if you care for your life and for your loved ones and for what you're manifesting in this realm, then you have a care to unravel some of the darkness that's threatening our freedom and our sovereignty and our ability to just be these sentient human beings on this earth plane. So, yeah.
Wow. So you'd say maybe since you were a kid, you've always kind of known since you were a kid that something was a little off, I guess.
Well, I wouldn't say I had the philosophical and academic and empirical discernment at that time to really get a handle on the complexities of realizing that. I think that came later on in my teenage years, and to lead up to that, the third memory I remember having is I was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was in my bedroom, and my brother and I at the time, I have a twin brother who passed away, Mitchell Atkinson, rest in peace, miss your brother.
Man.
He passed away like 9 years ago on the eve of our 40th birthday, and that's a whole nother yarn we could get into later. But when at this one moment, as a very young child, I had an astral projection or an out-of-body experience, and I didn't know what it was at the time. And looking back in hindsight, in retrospect, I was able to unravel what happened to me. But basically, I awoke in my room and I went and sat on the doorsill of my bedroom, and I was literally in my bedroom at nighttime, sitting on the doorsill, and the doorsill became like a control room for like an airplane or a flying device. I think it's kind of similar to the Wizard of Oz when the house lifts up and travels and flies. So what happened is that the house literally lifted up and it flew over the landscape and rose up and down and went over mountains and into valleys, and the sun was shining, and I was sitting in the windowsill like I was at the control of a house plane, like I was the pilot. And I vividly remember it being so glorious and beautiful and stunning and magnificent. And I remember the entire earth realm, or the entire dome, was reverberating with this beautiful music, this angelic music. I remember filling the atmosphere, and the sun and the rolling hills. And I just flew over this thing, and it was just this really beautiful, stunning early memory. And what happened over the years is that I started having these inadvertent out-of-body experiences as a young kid that went into my teenage years and culminated into my 20s. And there was like this 20-year period where I would have these inadvertent astral projections or out-of-body experiences. And that became the basis of my spiritual foundation, of my metaphysical belief in my ability to articulate an empirical and anecdotal evidence from my own consciousness that consciousness exists outside the body, and that you can travel into this sub-reality, into these higher dimensions, into the fifth and sixth and seventh dimension and beyond, and commune with the creator himself, and connect with logos and with light and with the source. So
wow.
I don't mean to put a gender specific idea of the creator, but I think you get the sentiment. So no offense there to anyone. What happened though is that I developed this this really acute interest in mysticism and spirituality, which in my 20s got really serious. I ended up researching it and studying it. I read all of Robert Monroe's 3 legendary trilogy books on his out-of-body projections, which his first book was actually written the year that I was born. I took in, at the time, it was the whole analog era, and I took in all of this really incredible books that I would collect from bookstores. So you had to go into bookstores to make effort to like find knowledge.
Yeah.
And I would go to use bookstores, and I would always go into the occult section, the New Age section, and I started collecting books on astral projection and mysticism and subtle energy. But my main focus was astral projection. And I really think that God gives everyone a gift, and they give them a tangible gift on the material realm, like you're either an amazing artist or a poet or a musician or a philosopher or a researcher, or you're good with carpentry or with building or with manifesting, whatever it is that was gifted to you. We can find that gift. And for me, that gift was being an artist, being a visual artist. But on a spiritual level, or on a mystical or subtle energy or hyperdimensional level, there's also a gift given. And the gift for me was being able to project, being able to astral project. I meet a lot of other mystics and a lot of people involved in this amazing arena of the subtle energy paranormal community. And so many people have all these different gifts, from intuition to clairvoyance to channeling, et cetera, et cetera. So my gift was being able to project. And because of that, I've always been rooted in spirit and in consciousness because of that foundation that I have. And this could be maybe a story for another time, but in my mid-20s, it culminated into this phenomenal apex that really kind of you know what, I should probably bring that up right now, and then I'd like to regress back to another story, but it's probably a good time to bring that up. When I was in my mid-20s, right before I ended up manifesting and creating a beautiful child who was born in 1996, and I ended up raising her and having a family, and all that whole beautiful part of what it means to be, a parent and a human, and to manifest life. And who's 24 right now, and this beautiful, awesome, being. A year before that, I was gifted this one epic, stunning out-of-body experience where I lifted out of my body, and I had years of experience, so I was completely comfortable with like lifting out And then one of the things you have to do is you tune into the frequency of what I would say the fifth dimension. It's like basically surrendering to the source, or to this like vibration, this human resonance of the earth, or the cymatic resonance of your soul, on this, like you have to kind of let go and surrender. And once you do that, while you still remain lucid and cognitive and clear and awake, your body's falling asleep, the mind is staying awake. You tune into that and you fall into your spirit, your subtle energy, your consciousness, your astral body. And then once you fall into that and surrender, you lift out. And then once you will yourself, because everything's based in the word is power, the word is everything. Everything manifests with word and with language. So I would will myself, I'd lift up, and then I willed myself to travel to the farthest end of the astral plane. I wanted to see the edge of it. And I had done, every time I would do it, I was like a scientist. I would do all these experiments. I teach myself how to fly and how to land on tiny surfaces, or how to walk through walls, or how to stretch my body, or how to do all kinds of like X-Men style talents. And I really got good at learning about what my abilities were. And in that realm, what I learned is that everything is powered by language. So I demanded my consciousness to travel to the edge of the earth realm, or to the astral plane. And I went through this. I must have been traveling at an astronomically fast speed. I mean, I used to say it was at light speed or beyond, but I don't believe in quantum physics and superstring theory, and I think that's all deception and pseudoscience, so I don't like to use the language. But I traveled extremely far for a long period of time. At this one moment, I open up my eyes, and there was this beautiful ocean of consciousness below me, like this stunning, still ocean that went all the way to the horizon, every direction. And I opened up my eyes, my astral eyes, and I could see it flying past me. I looked up at the horizon, and there was this beautiful horizon that with like either a setting sun or a rising sun, and I flew into this beautiful horizon of pure white light. When I saw that, I was really calm and cool, because you have to stay calm. You have to have grace under pressure. You can't get too excited, or it'll raise your heart rate and you wake yourself up. So you have to stay really cool and calm. So I closed my eyes. I flew into the light, and then my body stopped. And this is going to be a bridge. I'm going to skip a few things to get to the point. But I basically went through a few beautiful little terrain, and I came up to this huge, enormous wall, and the wall went infinitely on both sides. I couldn't see the end of it, and it went up as far as I could see into the darkness. And I was actually back on like a dock, and the water came up to like a shoreline, and I was up at this huge wall. So I felt like I made it to the edge of that realm, whether it was the fifth dimension or whatever, for the lack of language to describe what that is. I think it was a higher dimensional frequency realm that exists parallel to this realm, where consciousness comes from, and where the creator comes from, and where all this manifestation comes from. So I was in that metaphysical realm, and in that space, I look up, and there's this enormous portal, this big opening door, and these stunning hieroglyphs and all this language written on the doorway. And it was monumental. It must have been like 20 feet tall. And the wall went all directions, a big portal, a shoreline, the ocean's behind me. And I felt an energy coming at me, this really powerful energy. I felt something coming from the tunnel towards me. And I just stood there hovering, because in that realm, you're actually made of pure light and you're floating. So on this hovering light being, in the fifth dimension, you still have your form, you still have your body. So my hands were still the same, but it was all made of light. It was made out of literally light. This is the only way, like in infinite millions of specks of light. It's like looking up into the night sky. That's kind of what the body's made of. It's just made of stars, starlight.
Oh, wow.
And I'm hovering there, floating, being aware that I'm asleep, and I'm projecting, and I'm being presented this, I'm being gifted what I asked for, which was I want to go to the edge. And out of the darkness, out of this portal, out of this doorway, out of this archway, came four beautiful, magical, sentient, feminine, light warriors, light beings. But they weren't made of light. They actually had all kinds of military garb and warrior garb and like, you know, their weapons and all their gear. And they had, you know, and they were kind of timeless. They were just decked out. They looked like they were warriors. And they were decked out in all this ancient garb that had a mix of like modern elements and ancient elements and things like that. And they quickly came up right to me and kind of clicked around me, like one in front, one on the right, one on the left, and one in the back. And I was so taken aback and so, you know, kind of in spiritual shock, I guess, that I started getting too excited and my heart rate was racing. And the one main woman looking right at me said, "He's too nervous now. We can't tell him. He's too nervous now. We can't tell him." And she could probably sense that I wasn't ready for this moment or this communion or this meeting of consciousness of a sleeping human in an astral plane connected to the material realm, as these spirit beings from the higher realms were going to have a conversation with me. And I blew my cool and I ended up waking myself up because I lost that inability to have grace under pressure, and I couldn't keep my heart rate controlled, and I woke myself up.
Wow.
Ever since then, I have wondered, what were they going to tell me? What conversation were we going to have? What connection would we have made if I hadn't have lost that connection? So one of my life regrets, and I wouldn't say it's a regret because I don't think I was ready for it at the time, but was not staying in that space where I could meet them and connect with them. So for some reason, ever since that moment, my ability to project has been completely taken from me. I have not been able to project since I was about 25, but I had about 20 years or so of really active projections, and then 5 years in my 20s of like really refining it and doing it hundreds of times. And I cultivated the talent and the art of, you know, how to project. And then at that moment it was taken from me. My child was brought into my life and I became a parent and started a family and went on that whole journey. And so for the last 25 years now, since that era, I've been attempting to get back to that space. And I think that the moment now is that I had to live in the material world. I had to like struggle and fall and, you know, be a human and raise a family and have a busy career and be an artist and be a researcher and be a friend and be a comrade. And I had to learn from that realm so that I could ignite the great work now, because in the alchemical mystical tradition, they say that your great work cannot happen until you're in your 40s or your 50s. Like, you have to live life and become human and know what it means to be human and rise and fall and you know, have pain and struggle and strife and joy and love and hope. And you have to become this, you know, you have to distill yourself in the human experience. So now more than ever, I feel that I'm able to maybe rekindle that and awaken that ability, and to go back to that portal again, and to maybe even meet another guide who will take me into the portal, because I'm assuming that might be access to a higher dimension, at least metaphorically, at least as a transition as a human. I can relate to an open door, into a wall, into an ocean, and they're presenting that to me so my consciousness can adapt to, like, hey, I'm going up to a higher realm, or I'm going to commune with the, you know, the console of consciousness or something.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you, is that so when I was a kid, I would have these really lucid dreams, and it was just so lucid I could tell. Well, to me, they were they were indistinguishable from reality, from the physical reality that I had experienced. And so I'm wondering, if and you're saying that as you grow older, once you reach that certain age in your 20s, that it just went all away, and it was quite similar for me. Like in my youth, I would have these crazy vivid dreams about all kinds of things, and have dreams where I was floating and flying and
Yeah.
all these things, and that it went away for me. And it is definitely something interesting. And but it seems like you were super in tune with that. And does that are those realms and the astral travel and things that you were doing in your youth, does that have a lot of an effect on your art and how you became
Yeah.
an artist?
Absolutely. Most of my art, I would say overwhelmingly, a huge percentage of it is imbued with the spirit and with mysticism and with alchemy and with the transmigration of the soul and with the ascensionist spiral path up the mountain, closer to the creator. So because I've had those powerful experiences, and I really, and that's the thing about in like empirical or anecdotal evidence, is that it's this concept that consciousness itself, that we don't have to appeal to the authority, and we don't have to fall into a logical fallacy of appealing to the indoctrination or to the authority of peer-reviewed scientists or to our education or to the priest or to the priest class of whether it's in whatever denomination or topic that is. And it's this idea that you are actually connected to your own truth through your own experience. You experience things with your own consciousness. So I know, and no one can take this away from me, that I've witnessed and I've gazed upon these higher dimensions. I don't need to have a sophisticated scientific experiment with a bunch of peer-reviewed articles being written and a bunch of tests, proving that subtle energy exists. I know that it does because my consciousness has been there. And though I do appreciate institutions like the Noetic Institute and some of the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences, and a lot of these rogue scientists / mystics that are trying to prove that subtle energy does exist, and you can test them to a demonstrable level to suggest that abilities like
Remote viewing.
Exactly. There's compelling research to suggest that this phenomenon does exist. On a personal level, though, I don't need those tests because I've gazed upon that. I've hundreds, thousands of times I've lifted out of my body and I've traveled that realm, and I've had the most phenomenal experiences. One of them I should say too is that at the apex, like literally the moment that I started tattooing 27 years ago, back in 1993, it was like almost like a gift to get me ready to have this relationship and this narrative and this communion and this sacrament with the source, so that the artwork that I would make throughout this tattoo journey and throughout this artistic awakening post art school, and merging a lot of the traditional kind of academic things I learned in art school, the formalities with that, with the tattoo narrative and the tattoo aesthetic, merging the two and kind of having those intertwine like two serpents going down this path as those two serpents intertwine up the spiral mountain, is that all of my work is imbued with this mysticism. But to give you an empirical, anecdotal moment for me, like outside of that connection I had, when I was 25, when I was about 22 when I first started tattooing 3 years prior to that, and kind of right at the peak of when I was really comfortable with projection and was devouring the books, and I was talking about it. I was really into researching it and studying it and cultivating the talent. I was taking it very seriously. I lifted out of my body, and I just moved from Columbus, Ohio, where I went to art school from 1991 to 1993. And I moved back to Indiana University to live with my twin brother for the first time since our departure after high school. And literally at the same moment, right when the tattoo gear was coming in the mail that we ordered through the back of a tattoo magazine at the time, a Huxley Spalding kit for $500. My brother sold a jalopy chopper motorcycle, that barely ran for $500. Then we bought this tattoo kit. And
wow.
Tattooing. I was going to become a painter and a sculptor and artisan and all that stuff, but I became predominantly a tattooist, and on the side I make other art. But the story goes in that space, in that youthful vitality of a 22-year-old consciousness, just pining for connection and to relationship with the great riddle and to commune in this mysterious tremendum that we live in. Like I was longing for connection. I was longing to be awakened. I lifted out of my body one night, and the first night I lifted, I asked, maybe because I just wanted to see if the darkness exists, but I asked, does evil exist? I lift out of my body, I'm hovering above my body, and I projected the question, does evil exist? And immediately I was attacked by some demonic force, some entity that was 3 times bigger than me. And we spun into this dramatic fighting circle as I'm trying to collect myself and deal with this demon and this darkness, it's beyond language how, whether it was an archon or whatever language that you want to put on this force, it was extremely aggressive and evil and attacked me. One of the techniques you do in that realm when you get scared is you just will yourself to wake up. It's that easy. You don't panic and have a nightmare and woe is me. All you do, and you get stuck in that realm, you just will yourself. Wake up, wake up, wake up. So immediately I was able to use that technique. I pulled myself out of my body. I sat up in my bed and I was like, wow, darkness exists. I just got attacked by some inexplicable, ancient, primordial, diabolical, monster. The following night, I lift up out of the body and I'm hovering again above my body, and I ask the opposite question. Does God exist? Immediately, my spirit body, again, made of beautiful infinite photon lights like the night sky out in the desert when there's no light pollution and you can see billions and billions of stars, little points of light. That's exactly what the body looks like. It's like a star field up in the sky. It's, infinite stars. It's souls. I really think that's a whole nother conversation if we ever want to get into geocentrism and flat earth and maybe what we're really looking up at the transcendental night sky. But I think it might be billions of points of consciousness and souls and energy fields, pushing the idea that astrology might actually be the real science and astronomy is actually the black magic hex and the pseudoscience caused to manipulate us and push a heliocentric, nihilistic, atheistic, evolution, Big Bang nonsense theory. Sorry about that little tangent there.
No, you're good.
My body's made of infinite light, just like the night sky. And I asked, does God exist? Instantly, I had the apotheosis of Watsun. My entire spirit body lifts up and is floating like this, gets pulled up, and I'm just like, and I get flooded with my first Kundalini experience, which is when all of the chakras, the crown chakra and all the different chakras are opened up and dilated, and you get this river of pure light flowing through your entire body. and I'm gazing up at a ball of pure white light, literally consciousness in the highest realm, maybe the 9th or 10th dimension, is pure white energy. It's lux, it's light, it's just this beautiful orb of consciousness. And I'm gazing up at the Creator, at God, at infinite, consciousness. And all I felt was all of the overwhelming things that you associate with natural law. I felt love, care, hope, compassion, empathy, freedom, sovereignty, creative novelty, infinite potentialities, like all of these really powerful forces of nature that come from the source. Like I talk a lot about love and community and compassion and care. Those are energetic elements that come from the Creator. They come from the source. So as I'm gazing up at this, my arms are back, this energy is flowing through me, and it probably lasted, I would say, about a second or two, but it felt like infinity. Like it was very quick on what I would say on a physical level, but on a mystical and spiritual level, or on a metaphysical level, on an abstract way, it was an infinite moment in time. So I was gently laid down.
Yeah.
And I woke up in my bed. I didn't have to, will myself to wake up, because I wasn't scared. I was communing with my Tinker tribe, to reference you. I was communing with I was communing at the gates of Twine Street. I was gazing upon the great riddle of consciousness of God, of this sacred coven of this ancient, beautiful, source that's manifested us and downloaded us into this material realm. And I very gently was laid back in my body, and I woke up and opened my eyes and was completely at peace. Wow. And I knew that God exists, that the Creator exists, that Jehovah is there, that whatever adjectives you want to put towards this source, I know I've been there. I have my anecdotal evidence, and there's no atheist, reductionist, materialistic, anti-God scientist out there that's going to tell me that consciousness does not exist outside the body, because I've witnessed it hundreds of times. And there's no one that could ever tell me or could defend atheism or agnosticism, because I believe in the Creator. And I've been a theist ever since then. In the 90s, it was really popular in the punk circles that I ran into to push this atheist or agnostic sentiment. And I was always that philosophically kind of rebel rouser that would question what I would consider their silly narrative. And I would present, theism or creation in contrast to atheism back then. It was a time of, when I look back in hindsight, I think that the left and the liberal persuasion was weaponized and co-opted by the controllers, and that they basically were forcing a kind of narrative onto that kind of punk community that was predominantly based in atheism,
socialism, Marxism, and all that kind of stuff.
It all started back then. So with all that stated, and thank you for letting me, I've actually never talked about any of this stuff, and it actually, though we were considering talking about, coming into some more topical current events. Maybe we can save that for the second hour, and we can wrap up the first hour with mysticism and with consciousness and finishing this narrative.
Well, yeah, because I've had some experiences myself, and one of the most powerful. I've had two very, very powerful experiences where I came to the same conclusion, is that we're more than the physical body. And it was recently that I went and did a medicine, Bufo alvarius, and that was like seeing. And in that experience, I had something similar where it felt like I was connected to God, and God revealed that this is all a matter of free will. Everything that happens here, it's all free will, and it can either lead down the path of ultimate destruction, or it could lead to ever more creation and expansion and extreme creation to infinity, and it never ends. And so it's that really, kind of I really resonate with what you were saying there, was that there's those the two dichotomies of fear and love, and we're seeing it play out. We're seeing it play out right now in the reality, because
in the most dramatic ways.
Yeah, and it's just I think it's important that everybody kind of go on a spiritual quest to at least understand that there is more than just this material reality.
All right, guys, and starting from here, I'm gonna pause this interview, and then we're gonna shift into another topic, which is how some traumas in our lives have really pushed us in the direction of going towards the truth, and just talking about how trauma may it may be that some people have to experience an extreme trauma of some kind in their life to actually push them to taking action towards living their true purpose, and at least going down that path toward their true purpose in truth and seeking the truth. So, and why it may be so difficult for people to actually confront the truth is that it may take an experience which really shakes their core of their beliefs to make them look and confront not only themselves but the outside world and the reality that we live in. So we're gonna move into this. We're gonna do a shift here. This was a 3-hour conversation. I'm gonna condense it. I'm gonna skip over some parts, and then we're gonna bring you into this discussion on trauma, and then it's also gonna kind of bring us into where we're at today, and kind of some ideas on where things are going, and then some solutions to where things are going. So this is some things that I've never talked about on before, open on a podcast. So we're both being pretty vulnerable here. So I wanted to share this with you guys in hopes that this may help some people, and maybe give some insight to people on the type of things that some people have gone through that have kind of pushed them towards a journey of going, in opposition to where the world is going. So, all right. So hang on for a ride here, and I hope this is helpful for some people out there.
Smile kept me grounded. I kept smiling back,
Hell yeah!
How
the deception and all the
tricks and all the darkness afoot as I go in there with my hatchets of love and light and truth. Just smile at me, and you'll bring me back to reality.
All right.
You're like, hey, Watson, and just start having the giggling mystic. Just start laughing. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Okay, let me mellow out here.
All right.
Heart chakra.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah.
I'm being a little silly, but also I think there's some truth in there.
Oh, yeah. Great. Yeah, man. I mean, that's just who I am. I love to smile. So, yeah.
Why don't we take 5?
Okay. That sounds good. All right, that sounds good.
All right.
I can pause it right here. So, welcome back. We're in the second hour of the show, and going into this second hour, we're going to talk about some of the topics of the day, and kind of how we got into this whole diving down the rabbit hole experience that we're both going through, and that journey that we're both on, and kind which led us to meeting at the whole Anarchadelphia experience. But I know in my life it took a great tragedy to get me to really look at the world for what it is, and that came for me. It came with the death of my brother about 6 years ago. My brother committed suicide, and from that point on, it led me down the path toward looking at the world for what it really is, and for all of the deception and all the lies that have been told to me. I just couldn't accept that, this thing would have happened to my brother, and it was a great trauma that really pushed me into the seeking the truth and trying to get more people to understand what was really happening in the world. And so saying that, I was just gonna, kind of see it. Maybe I think that this is something that really might set people off on that journey towards seeking the truth, and it may have to come to that point for many people to
through trauma,
to go through a trauma, to
nudge the psyche, to push the spirit along, and to ask questions.
Yeah.
Experience that darkness so you can see that it exists.
Yeah, I think that is part of what many people, unfortunately, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but unfortunately, I think that might be the case, that people do have to go through that trauma, and to kind of accelerate them forward. So
what you're saying is fascinating, because I've actually never thought about this, and I'm kind of inspired by this concept. But you're actually presenting an idea that through trauma and through pain and sorrow and depression, in the context of a really intense traumatic experience, that it somehow nudges or awakens the spirit to start ask questions. And my question to you is that, did you ask the basic, question that maybe I asked when I went through my own trauma of why? How did this happen? Why did this happen? And then you start thinking about it critically and doing research and studying. And if you don't mind me asking, what were the variables at play that caused his untimely passing?
Well, my brother was on antidepressants and these SSRI medications, and I, it really bugged me that right around the time of his death, that these medications, which he had been taking, and which had been part of his life for a while. I really questioned, why that was even necessary, or if there were alternatives to people having to do that, and that really led me down the path to understanding that there are plenty of alternatives, and these SSRI medications are very harmful and very dangerous for people to be taking.
So your inquiry, or your ability to care for your brother, caused you to ask questions about big pharma and about a lot of these drugs that are peddled to our youth and to the culture and to people. So was your first inquiry or your first unraveling critically looking at the pharmacratic, big pharma, questions around why are those drugs even allowed to be presented and pushed out into the populace?
Well, it really started digging deep into what these SSRIs, these selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are. which essentially it just these medications just keep the body from regulating its own serotonin production. So basically,
what is SSRI again? I forget what that stands for.
selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
And that's connected to what drugs or what condition?
So it's tied to a lot of these antidepressants and depression medications and all that kind of stuff. And basically, it just keeps your body from producing and regulating its own serotonin production. And so basically, your serotonin production just goes into full blast, but your body needs a chance to regulate that and be able to.
And what is serotonin again connected to? What physiological process is serotonin connected to?
Serotonin regulates like how your mood is and your sleep cycles and how all that functions. So
in a natural, organic kind of terrain theory of not having the toxins, those type of neurotoxin inhibitors in your system, your body would self-regulate in a way that would allow you to function and to thrive and to be healthy and happy. So
yes,
you're saying that these drugs, they amplify the serotonin, so they throw your whole chemistry off?
So basically, it just tells the body to just produce serotonin like crazy.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then your body naturally it will produce the serotonin, but it'll draw it back so that you can have it naturally, so that you can be able to go to sleep at the right time, to feel happy, to
I totally get it. So to reel it back to what this the general essence of this inquiry is that having the trauma of, say, your brother's suicide and his passing caused you to critically look at what influences were at play and why was he on these creepy drugs, and maybe if he wasn't on those, then he would still be here with you. So it puts you, I think what we're unveiling here or kind of discovering together is that through trauma, it develops a critical analytical mindset based in the trivia method and asking heavy questions and using discernment and trying to solve the riddle of what went wrong, like what caused the trauma. So I can totally relate to the fact that experience that you had, nudged you along to start asking questions. And then pretty quickly, I'm sure within a few years, you had the epiphany like, oh, fuck. Big Pharma is the evil sorcery black magic that was put in place that arguably unraveled my brother's ability to function and caused him to be so depressed to take his own life. And in that mental capacity to research for love and care for your brother, you unravel the darkness, this ancient force we talked about in the first show. Like that darkness is manifested in these big eugenics, companies that are manipulating and harnessing our ability to thrive and be healthy through big, really dark, diabolical institutions like Big Pharma. And with that stated, would you mind if I went into my experience with that?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah. And I know, we were talking a little bit beforehand here, and just, this is kind of an interesting thing that we brought up, and that trauma may be the catalyst to going on this journey. So, yeah, if you'd like to share your story about that.
Well, and I thank you for your friendship, and I think we were destined to meet and become brothers in truth, and to I hope, hopefully, maybe after this interview, this will be the hazing for my initiation into the Tinder tribe. If there's any other weird things I need to do, to be initiated, let me in on. I'm just, I'm not into weird sexual perversion. Bring that up, I'm going to say no, and this tribe isn't for me, but that's
Yeah.
the initiation into the dark arts right there, brother.
Yeah, we don't go down that road.
Hence the liberal agenda and the weaponized polyamory and the open relationships, moral relativism, and the anything goes policy on the playa. If that's not dark hex, I don't know what is, brother. But so with that stated, again, we were talking initially about going into Tartaria, into the fake history, into the COVID stuff, and which we'll get to. But during the break, we both exchanged these stories. He was about how we got on this journey, and he asked me that. Greg asked me that at the first hour, and though I told all this other influences and elements and anecdotal revelries about what ignited me on my mystical path, there was one element that was really crucial that I didn't get to, and I was apprehensive about bringing it up, and I was inspired to maybe share this story. But before I tell my story that really profoundly traumatized my being on such a deep level that it awakened and ignited me on my path, and my gift of righteous anger and my gift of curiosity on trying to find what darkness is that would cause such trauma in my life, it turned me into a critical thinker and into a philosopher, into a mystic. And I don't think the mystic path can be complete without, or can begin without, profound trauma, profound sorrow, and profound joy and profound love. Like, you have to have those two experiences to be ignited on your hero's journey, to reference Joseph Campbell's concept, up that ascensionist spiral path, up to back to the source. So before I tell this, I think everyone listening to this should consider, if they are listening to the Tinder tribe, then they're probably interested in truth and interested in forbidden knowledge, interested in esoteric wisdom, interested in, all kinds of other things relevant with, for lack of a better word, this alternative media truth community that we're all entrenched in, and part of this like coven of researchers and mystics and rebel rousers and monkey wrenchers and paradigm smashers and iconoclasts. So everybody out there, reflect in on your own. What ignited you to awaken on your journey? Was it based in a traumatic experience that caused you to start questioning? And then did you use that ability to question to ask and to critique and to unravel and dismantle other false narratives? So with all that stated, that was a really long caveat. I apologize for that, Greg, but sometimes I like to lay the atmosphere and the vibration for what's to come next. So with all that stated, in a space of love and care and respect and appreciation for my family and for all of my friends and for all my comrades and for anybody else out there who's experienced trauma, I think that it might actually be a gift. I think that the idea that through that dark night of the soul, you actually might awaken, you might get nudged. And with that stated, I feel that all of my trauma I've been through is kind of prophetic, or it's destiny. It was meant to be. It was written in the in the sacred books before I was incarnated into this temporary, fleeting, sentient body that I'm in. So with that stated, I need to tell this story in a place of like of love. I've actually I never share this story with anybody. I don't talk about it. Only my closest friends and kindred spirits and comrades even know this, but I think it's important for people to maybe hear this so that they can have appreciation for how complex and dynamic and intertwined my personality is on all these different levels. I grew up in the 70s. I was born in 1971, had a really amazing, pretty normal middle-class upbringing in the Midwest, born in the northern part of Indianapolis, Indiana, basically in the, in this amazing countryside of cornfields and open fields. And I grew up listening to rock and roll and 70s FM radio. I grew up with mini bikes and go-karts, and I built tree forts before I was 10 years old. We never had a curfew. We could stay out as late as we want. On all of our days off, we would wake up in the morning and disappear into the fields and into the neighborhoods. We'd hang out with friends. We'd touch base with mom in the middle of the day, and then we'd be gone until the sunset, or maybe a little bit after sunset. It was an era of adventure and being free. It was this golden era in this American experiment that we're in, when a lot of older people, my generation, really miss that. And we really feel for the young kids who don't have that sense of adventure because everyone's so scared to have that kind of freedom as a young kid. So I had a really, really great foundation, loving parents. Though my mother was an alcoholic, I don't judge for her that. She drank daily. I'm pretty sure she drank when in utero, so that's one of the reasons I think my brother and I and our family, the siblings struggled with alcoholism. But she was a really beautiful, creative, loving person. I think her one fall from grace was maybe her drinking and her heavy smoking. My father was a workaholic, and he worked nonstop. He was just like me. He was just insatiable momentum. On his days off, he'd spend the whole day cleaning the house, doing lawn, doing yard work, working on the cars. He was just literally an unstoppable force of activity, and I love him for that. But he was also part of the silent generation. He never talked. He was very quiet. And when I look back in hindsight, I think that because he worked for General Motors, he was professionally required to take a vow of secrecy because he was basically working for the military industrial industries and was, had a career working for General Motors, which you look back in hindsight. And I think that they require very strict vows of secrecy. So he was a very quiet man, but a very loving and hard worker. With all that stated, the entire drug culture that ignited in the 60s and ravaged the 70s and was tearing through the 80s with sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and that forbidden fruit of thinking you're against the man or against conservative family values by listening to, rock and roll and partying and smoking pot and doing drugs and drinking and chasing girls and just, that whole like fancy free, like rebel rousing lifestyle was a huge part of the culture back then, and I naturally fell into it. But one of my family members who was a part of that, heavily influenced my brother and I, and we were heavily entrenched in that whole lifestyle at a really young age, and still being joyful and fun and spirited. We got pretty entrenched in that party culture and that lifestyle early on. So I really started using drugs and drinking and smoking by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, because in part the culture was celebrating that. It was a big part of the scene. And I think I'm stalling right now because I'm just trying to give a little foundation for this.
Yeah.
I'm going to come up to this moment that's really hard for me to talk about, but right before this event, my brother and I really became artists. We started learning how to draw, even though we were smoking a lot of pot, listening to cool music, and in part, and kind of having little girlfriends, hanging out, and enjoying the elements and the positive attributes of that type of stuff. We also discovered that we were artists, and we started making banners for all the shows we went to, like Rush and Iron Maiden and AC/DC and all these other epic shows at the time. Was part of this banner culture. So we would draw and illuminate these enormous bed sheets and would take them to these shows, and it was a part of the culture at the time. And in that kind of normal upbringing I had, oh man, woo! All right, Greg, here we go.
Yeah.
We had this traumatic moment where a family member attempted to kill my mother with a kitchen knife. And it was a bright sunny afternoon in 1985. I think the date was June 25th, if I remember. And I was scheduled to go hang out with a friend of mine, Mark Hodgen, who passed away from a drug overdose a few years ago. Rest in peace. I miss that friend. And we were watching, it was Saturday afternoon cartoons, and there was some kind of, we were all sitting around, and the whole family was there except for my father, who was always traveling and wasn't home that much. And I think it was some commercial that triggered it, but the event happened really quickly when the family member got up and stabbed my mother. I was 14 years old. I was right there. And I instantly went into warrior mode, and I went after the person and took them down in a pretty aggressive way. And the entire thing was profoundly traumatic. The entire family crumbled and was destroyed. My mother was in and out of critical condition for 3 or 4 months, and then 5 years later ended up dying to, I think, probably complications resulting from that. And the family member went in and out of prison for a few years, and had a really difficult time trying to come to terms with that. Over the years, because of that trauma, I asked the same questions. And let me say really quick, there was a lot more detail in there, and it was very hard for me to just say that.
Yeah.
And however I said it with all kinds of, emotional elements. So I'm just going to allow that story to be presented. And I want to turn it into something positive.
Yeah.
Because what happened to me because of that trauma, I had the same experience that you had, where I became really critical of drugs. And I would blame the fact that I think the drugs, which was a cornucopia of stuff, just list anything popular at the time. And I think that was an influence. And also, prior to that, and for 3 years after that, I ended up unraveling and going. It was completely out of control. Was in and out of prison 2 second times. I was a total juvenile delinquent. I was totally unmanageable. My brother and I were out of control. The whole family fell apart. My sister went into a chaotic era. And something happened to me at 17, and I realized that I could draw, that I was an artist. I had known throughout the years as a young, growing up as a teenager, that we could draw, but it was something that I embraced it was right before my mother died, 2 years before, but I was a high school dropout. It took me 5 years to get out of high school because of all this stuff. I went back for the final year and finally passed all my classes, and I graduated, and I made the most overwhelming amount of artwork because I realized I was an artist and I could make art, and I could use art as a healing force to save me, to put me on the hero's journey up that path. And I realized after my mother died that I could never let her death be in vain, that I needed to make something of myself and to awaken an artistic identity that would represent her legacy well. And then over pretty quickly, I I grabbed on at 17 to art, and I ended up graduating from high school and getting a scholarship to go to an art school for 2 years, the Columbus College of Art and Design, from 91 to 93. Was so fixated and in love with learning and teaching and academia and being autodidactic, and this passion had so exploded in me that I was unstoppable, and I literally got A's and A pluses, was on the, had a 3.8 GPA for both years, was just like a totally overachiever, loved and devoured all the teachings, really became an artist. And then I ended up moving back to Indiana with my brother in 1993, and with his influence ended up getting into tattooing in 1993. And I focused that love and that fixation and that energy into tattooing and into art and into painting. And I've literally been obsessively fixated for my entire 27-year career, like 80% on tattooing, 80% on tattooing, and 30 to 20% on manifesting art, because I didn't want my mother's trauma or that passage to go in vain. So because that experience was so traumatic and so profound and so devastating and literally decimated our family, destroyed it, and we were just left to the ashes. We were just dust in the wind. In that context, I was able to ignite some fire within me to become the best artist I could possibly conjure up out of the farthest fringes of the collective ether. And I really truly believe that I would not be who I am. I wouldn't be Watsun Atkinsun. I wouldn't be Scry. I wouldn't be Wandering Tree. I wouldn't be, the cowboy angel, to reference what I used to call my brother, or the mischief brewer, or the libertarian, monkey wrencher, or iconoclastic, paradigm smashing, anti-statist rebel that I would be if it wasn't for that trauma.
Yeah.
So my celebration is that we should embrace our trauma. Mm-hmm. Don't be a liberal and whine about it and try to cancel somebody for it.
Right.
Don't drop habeas corpus in a fair trial and due process and go after somebody, because of whatever your trauma is. If it's actually based in real trauma and it's not like a faux trauma that, like, say, I think that's been weaponized with the radical left and stuff. It's actually a real, genuine trauma.
Yeah.
You can turn it into something really positive and empowering to awaken the mystic warrior to start asking questions. So I started asking the same questions that you did. Big Pharma was directly at play for, allowing those drugs to come into our family and manipulate us all on all kinds of different levels. And I literally blame that entire event on the big pharma drugs that came in and polluted the terrain of our family soul. And the overwhelming sentiment here for you, Greg, and for me, and for all the listeners, which I think Greg and I just discovered this by our enveloping friendship and kinship here, is that we've both had trauma. He's lost a brother. I've lost a brother.
Yeah.
I lost a mother, and I lost a brother in another traumatic experience 9 years ago, when my identical twin brother, who looks just like me, and we have the same history.
Wow.
We both got on the tattoo at the same time, and we were just like, we were super close. And he died of a drinking accident the night before our 40th birthday. And I was traumatized. It was literally one of the most profound and heaviest and densest moments of my entire life. And it really unraveled me, and I became very complicated and angry and urgently trying to figure out what forces at play caused that. And it was with his death that opened up the floodgates of me having the righteous anger representing his legacy about what kind of culture creates those variables that cause him to be in a fast car at the witch's hour the night before our 40th birthday on a new moon and to flip his car 12 times and die was the drugs that are in our culture to destroy us and to inhibit us and to cause chaos and division and turmoil and sorrow. So since that moment, everything went on hyper gear, and I started researching and dismantling everything. And in that context, I'm safe to say I could probably talk about any topic that the truth community is involved in, except for your specialty with this cryptocurrency. And this trauma, that first trauma I had as a 14-year-old child, the other trauma I had as a literally turning 40 in the little twilight between 39 and 40 on the morning of my 40th birthday.
Wow.
Or the day before. So it was like one day before.
Mm-hmm.
That trauma was a second one. And then the third trauma, which was, again, this is a really hard topic to talk about, but I'm brave enough and had the courage to speak this truth. The third trauma was 2 years ago. I was violently assaulted and attacked in a way that I would be comparable to when I asked the ether, when I had that astral projection at age 22, does evil exist? And I got attacked by a demon.
Yeah.
That same energy and that same horrible diabolical force attacked me 2 years ago with false sexual accusations in a Me Too assault where they dropped due process and a fair trial and habeas corpus, and basically this radical left-wing fourth wave intersectional delusional, insane, broken feminist
wave movement
came after me and said some false accusations and didn't give me the honor or the dignity to defend myself, and presented all kinds of false narratives and all kinds of really complicated elements. That what happened was that the flash mob that got behind that element didn't vet any information. They just believed all victims. And then this insane liberal white knight male feminist and radical female intersexual feminist mayhem just comes out and just like attacks you and just destroys you like this super evil dark force, and doesn't give you the honor or the dignity of habeas corpus. So if it was based in love and somebody was falsely accused, then they rightly need to be put up in front of the tribunal, and they need to be judged in a fair trial. You need to show proof, and you need to give them the ability to defend themselves.
Yeah.
And after you have this court proceeding, then you can you can decide whether the evidence is in their favor or not. That concept of habeas corpus was not gifted to me. That's how they weaponize the radical left in the Me Too movement. They'll use that weapon to go after anybody. They drop due process. They destroy. They cull. They have a season of sacrifice, and they go after and devour somebody's essence without giving them the ability to defend their truth. And if I was able to defend my truth, there were all kinds of anomalies with her story. She set up a weird camera that wasn't part of the normal security system. She there was a friend of mine that contacted me who was kind of part of these anonymous circles, and he had unraveled in her email that there was a huge payout about a week before, and said that the money had to be in cash. It couldn't be digital. There was all kinds of creepy associations with this witchy Aleister Crowley, Church of Thelema circle that she had gone and did like a guest spot at a few weeks before. And we had actually gotten into an argument prior to the conversation about the difference between black magic and white magic before I tattooed her. And she said she was in allegiance with Crowley's Church of Thelema and was basically reiterating and parroting the narrative that she was indoctrinated with in this coven up in upstate New York, which I think is peddling a lot of super dark satanic tenets and radical left-wing open relationship, anything goes, polyamory, kind of like pleasure-oriented cult that I think she could have potentially been charged to do. The point being is that in that trauma, in that experience, I stayed relatively cool, except for when I tried to use my sacred masculine element and go after them and establish a due process with a social media tribunal where I told my testimony on the same Instagram hub that came after me, and it kind of backfired me because everybody was saying I was toxic masculine and that I was being aggressive, and that that I should just apologize and accept the false accusations and et cetera, and just be canceled and destroyed.
Wow.
The narrative is this: I've become so aware and so entrenched in that conversation, in unraveling the fallacies of the left.
Yeah.
The left. I was literally a liberal and on the left pretty much my entire life up until around, maybe the middle of Obama's, era, when I started questioning all of his, questionable antics, and then I've abandoned it since then. But I literally learned a lot about cancel culture and about feminism and about intersectional feminism and about all the complexities in that, and what the far left is peddling, it's freed me from it. Like, my garden has been cleaned. Like, it was actually a blessing. Like, I have a friend of mine that says, that was meant to happen, Watson. You were meant to be attacked by some insane, out of control, demonic, unhinged, radical feminist narrative to clean your garden. Because now I have no allegiance to any of these insane liberals, which are completely out of context and not relevant now in this post-COVID era. No one cares about the social justice warriors. They've all they basically were canceled.
That has kind of gone away off the map. Yeah.
My essence and my history, not my essence, but my history has also been, I've always questioned the far right. So here I am now at this central perch, this kind of neutral perch, being politically homeless. I'm very critical of the left, which I wasn't as critical of before this. I'm very critical of the right. And now I'm free. My garden's been cleaned. I don't deal with any of these people anymore. I have no allegiance to these insane, radicalized, fringe
polarities.
And I'm in this beautiful kind of open terrain, this open pasture right now, and I find myself at an anarchy conference meeting you. And what is anarchy in its truest form?
Sovereignty.
It's sovereignty, it's natural law, and it's an anti-statist philosophy that's based in the idea that we can rule and govern ourselves. That we don't need this. It's anti-statist. And what's the left and the right? It's statism. So if that hadn't have happened, I wouldn't be as passionate I am about the true tenets of what real anarchy is and what real freedom and real sovereignty is. And the most liberating thing you can be is to be politically homeless and to be not showing any allegiance to the left or the right.
Yeah.
And that's my way of turning trauma into something positive. And to, 3 profound episodes, age 14, age 39, and age 47 or 46, 47. And I feel like I'm completely ignited and raw. Like Rumi has this really beautiful quote that I think is an epitaph on his, Rumi being the mystic poet from like 700 years ago from Persia. Is that, the poetic, concise little axiom is, I am raw, well done, and burnt to a crisp. Now more than ever, I understand what he meant. When I was younger, it sounded silly. I didn't get it, but now I get it. And I think what the journey is, what the illuminated resistance is, what the truth community might actually be based in is some kind of trauma. And how do you assimilate and how do you turn that trauma into something? How do you turn base consciousness, like the low vibration of trauma? How do you have your alchemical, transmutation? And how do you turn that energy into gold, into light, into lux? That's basically what we're talking about, Greg.
Right.
We turned the trauma, we turned the sorrow into gold. We turned base consciousness into gold on a metaphorical level. So I think that's a powerful idea. And I don't know if I've actually heard it in the context of this community.
Yeah.
It might be interesting if we wanted to collaborate, is that maybe we could start interviewing people in this community and starting that out on maybe some, on was there trauma that ignited you? And then having that as a confession and a way to heal. Like me talking like this, I've never talked about this. I don't ever talk about this. I suppress it. And instantly I feel lighter.
Yeah. Same here. And, from having some conversations with, the people that I brought on the show, many people have been traumatized by maybe not the same types of trauma, but they've been traumatized in different ways by the state and by, experiencing issues of standing up for their own, their own human rights and having them ignored by, and abused by the state. And so, there's multiple ways, but I do believe that and that's why I do hold compassion for people that may not be getting it right now, and what's going on in the world is because, well, maybe they have to go through some type of trauma. Yeah. It has to be very powerful for them to shake out of the slumber that they're in.
Wow, that's powerful, man. I really like where this is going. It's funny how when we first talked, we kind of, gave a little rough outline about maybe what we were going to attempt to talk about, and then our beings just ended up unraveling this idea and sharing our stories that in trauma is an awakening, and in that awakening is a call to mystical arms, and in that being charged to imbue and to embrace the transcendental sacred masculine and this alchemical marriage of these true ancient primordial forces. Like, I really think that the illuminated resistance, or that this maybe the long lineage of what it meant to be a spiritual warrior, or a warrior who's devoted to the great mystery, to the highest high, to all these positive attributes we associate with high frequency consciousness, is that it merges these forces, and you're able to be really gentle and caring and sweet and loving and nurturing and healing and compassionate and empathetic, and at the same time, you're able to be, on an opposite way when it comes to protecting all the goodness that we love in life.
Right.
All that infinite ocean of logos and the breath of creation. that the sacred warrior, the sacred masculine, not that there's not the feminine undertones in that is care and love and nurturing and those beautiful feminine archetypes that we are so connected to, and that in that space you can go forward to the front lines and you can talk about COVID-19 84. You can talk about germ theory versus terrain theory. You can break down the difference between heliocentrism and geocentrism and have a conversation about our cosmology. You can dismantle and go after, the geoengineering and directed energy weapons and disaster capitalism, and you can critically look at social engineering and cultural anthropology that's designed to manipulate and create social movements, and these manufactured fake, hippie movements and the 60s revolution and a lot of the punk rock scene and the new wave scene and the hip hop scene and all these other scenes and the drug scene and the party culture and the Tinder culture and being doped up on Netflix and mainlining GMOs and junk food and all kinds of neurotoxin inhibitors and slinging big pharma scripts and smoking your Frankenweed and partying like you think it's, like there's going to be tomorrow, YOLO lifestyle, like this kind of debased, what I call pleasure cult that's not based in morality or ethics, or doesn't have a sense of what natural law is or what it means to be a spiritual being, because what they've also done is they've weaponized atheism and they've weaponized nihilism and they've weaponized the existential crisis that most young kids and young adults and people are imbued with. And all of this stuff is part of the fascinating research community of the sacred masculine that wants to know the darkness afoot. So let's take this one step. Let's go into this, into the topical era now. We talked about how our trauma ignited it. We had the nice, amazing conversation about in the first hour about all these hyperdimensional sub-reality, these two forces at play between love and light and all that stuff. We brought it up into this modern context. We've actually accepted that our trauma has been a gift. It's ignited us.
Yeah.
We're on the front lines now, and we're not scared. We're fearless. So with that context, I think it might be interesting to maybe bring up the very pressing zeitgeist of this moment in time right now with this COVID-19 84 agenda.
Yeah, I think it's really important to look at this and to say what's going on here is, the wool's being pulled over a lot of people's eyes on this, in my opinion, and been tumbling down the rabbit hole myself here, looking into the information between germ theory and terrain theory. And one of the big things that I discovered on this path here, and in a lot of the information that I've been looking through, is that what's being presented in front of everybody's faces is this picture of a virus, of what they're claiming to be coronavirus, and
a CGI cartoon.
Yeah, and it's
Saturday morning cartoons.
And it's related to the expression of human exosomes in the body, which help you to expel toxins from the environment. And so every time I see this image, I'm just like, wow.
Well, in essence, to kind of maybe spin a yarn or to present a general philosophical terrain, to use that word, to our listeners about, I think what's exciting about this moment in time is that you know, and anytime these big psychological operations, these psyops, these agendas are rolled out, there's a certain sub community of people, part of this, you know, this truth community, that are already ready to research and to try to vet the information and put the truth up in front of the tribunal and give it habeas corpus in a fair trial. So we're not liberals on the left who are dismissing, fair trial for truth, but we're actually seekers that are imbued in truth. So we put it up in front of this court, this ministry of truth or whatever. And what we quickly find out is that the germ theory is a theory. It's hypothetical speculation established with a guy in the late 1800s, or I'm not sure exactly. I think it was the tail end of the 1800s. His name was Louis Pasteur, and he presented this idea that germ theory or viruses exist outside the body, and they cause illness and sickness. And these contagions that you can breathe out, other people can get infected with them, and those are living, breathing viruses that multiply, infect other people, and then get into that other host and make them sick, and then they infect somebody else, and it's this domino effect while these pandemics spread through these viruses. At the same exact moment that he was presenting this idea, this guy named Beauchamp,
Anthony,
spelling it right, yeah,
Antoine Beauchamp.
He was instantly presenting what I feel is the true science, not the pseudoscience of germ theory. He was presenting this idea of terrain theory, that the body is actually so intelligent and so smart and so divine and so transcendental and so inexplicably intelligent, beyond comprehension, beyond language, that the body actually manufactures viruses and releases solvents around a toxic particulate and creates a virus, or a solvent around it, hence a virus, to cleanse and heal the body from a toxic terrain or a toxic environment. So viruses aren't a bad thing. They're actually a really good thing. They've turned viruses into some boogeyman, or to some, the new terrorist, or the unseen, death lurking around every corner, when really you want your body to create viruses to cleanse itself and to heal itself. And so theory actually goes as far as saying that viruses, in the context of germ theory, says, like contagions that actually can manifest and grow and multiply and infect, hundreds of thousands of hosts and create like a fractaling kind of pandemic, that they don't exist at all, that it's all a misnomer, it's all based in fake pseudoscience. And the thing that's fascinating is the one idea, or the academic concept that's in defense of saying that germ theory is pseudoscience and it's theoretical nonsense, is stupid as the heliocentric model, or in evolution, or in presenting this idea that consciousness can be arrested and put in a flash drive and uploaded into the next AI cyborg, like just these ridiculous notions that, at close scrutiny fall apart. Is that in this idea, in this really amazing concept is called Koch's postulates, which is this idea from a virologist at the time that said, if the germ theory is correct, then we need to establish a certain criteria to prove that it exists. And being a layman philosopher and not being a virologist, or not, going to school for this, research of interest, I'm presenting these ideas from this, perspective. So forgive me if I'm just going to give you a general overview of this, but I think the general idea with Koch's postulates is that if a virus exists, you have to actually be able to isolate it, to take it from an infected host, to isolate it and to purify it, and to get all its garbage out of it, to purify it, to get it to multiply, to actually get it to grow into some cellular structure and watch it grow, and then to infect another host with this virus, to get that host sick and then have it infect their body, and to take the virus out of their body and to do the same process again and isolate it, make it grow, and infect another host.
Right.
That, if germ theory was correct, that would be so easy to do. It would be basic, things you would do in virology class in college. That you could
virology 101,
It's never been satisfied. There's no proof that viruses exist. On the contrary, what they do is they use these electron microscopes or something that actually, the only way to view the cellular matter is they actually have to destroy it, and it's dead, and then they like stain it, and then you look at it and you're looking like at a dead animal. It's like, imagine trying to study life from looking at a nasty dog that's been pressed in between two plates.
Yeah.
A bunch of whatever, and then you wouldn't actually have any concept of what life was. So they can't actually see a living, breathing virus that can multiply. So the entire germ theory is based on a theoretical, speculation, theoretical concept that's never been proven. Viruses don't exist. But in the true, I think, transcendental science, the true transcendental wisdom of terrain theory is that it makes sense that the creator, that this great, stunning manifestation of life would actually create a defense mechanism to heal the body. So viruses,
toxins in the environment,
are actually good. The body manifests them and creates them to get rid of toxic particulates, to get rid of dead cellular structures, to get rid of neurotoxin inhibitors, to get rid of the GMOs and the nanobots and the aluminum and the strontium and the creepy, genetically modified frankenfood particulates. And it's so what's happening now is that when you throw in the mix of that and you add injury to insult, we have this new technology, this 3, 4, 5G technology. With each new generation, it gets more intense, it gets more aggressive. It has more of an impact on our physiology and our health. And so what's happening now is that not only are we getting hit with all of these toxic particulates, with all these neurotoxin inhibitors in our water, we're breathing them in from the geoengineering, we're smoking them with our frankenweed that Monsanto is going to weaponize and make available at your every gas station street corner as they legalize their frankenweed, that we're taking in all kinds of junk food and partying and this and that, and then media and TV and screen addiction and Wi-Fi, radioactive bombardment. We're literally living in a really toxic environment where our bodies are being assaulted on all fronts. It's the slow kill eugenics campaign that we've been researching and talking about for years. We're in the midst of a eugenics agenda to make us unhealthy. And what happens in terrain theory when you're unhealthy? Your body, generally speaking, most people are creating viruses to help heal the body. And in those viruses, and forgive me if I don't get this exactly right, but this is based on researching and a lot of some of my other heroes, between like David Crow, Amanda Vollmer, Dr. John Bierman, Andrew Kaufman, some of these other cool researchers, Dr. Lando, etc. There's all these doctors that are coming out talking about these ideas. And so one of the ideas is that the body creates and manifests these exosomes that are a byproduct of the viral overload. The toxic terrain, the terrain of the body is overloaded. So it's working a lot, dealing with trying to cleanse the body, because that's what the body is naturally charged to do. In that context, it releases these exosomes. The false positive test that the COVID-19 hoax is pushing and peddling is actually looking and searching for exosomes. I think it's one of the main things that they're looking for. Everyone's looking for exosomes. It doesn't matter what sickness you have. You could just be slightly you're going to release exosomes. You're going to go into the hospital and they're going to be like, "Oh, you have COVID." It's like, no, I don't. I have common flu, or I just have a headache, or I just am detoxing from last week of partying or some junk food I ate the other night. So
right.
so dangerous about this is that in how they've weaponized it is that not only have they mind controlled, manipulated everybody to believe in germ theory that contagions exist, but also that everybody's, affected by this toxic wasteland. We're creating and manifesting all these viruses and exosomes. And naturally, when you go in to get tested, you're probably going to get a false positive test that says you got COVID, when really you just need to cleanse. You need to go on a fast. You need to drink some water and eat raw foods. You need to give the body a break and recalibrate. You need to rest for a week and drink distilled waters and go lay in the sun and heal yourself.
Yeah.
You don't go to these doctors and get vaccinated and get a bunch of drugs that are just going to make your terrain sicker, and they're actually going to kill you.
Well, and I think that's really the big agenda here, is to get everybody to take, some proposed vaccine that, who knows what they're going to put in this thing, but, to mandatorily make it so that you have to take this vaccine, or else you're not going to be able to function in society, whether that means you have to take this before you can return to work in whatever work capacity that you're in, dealing with the public, or if you're going to travel somewhere, you may need to have some vaccine certificate or something like that.
So frustrating.
Yeah,
really frustrating. I do think that if we, you just have to not consent.
Yeah.
I think what's so complicated right now is I think the darkness and this agenda, this fake germ theory, this fake virus, this COVID 1984, these vaccines, the 5G technocracy, the Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, a lot of these agendas, I feel, in the spirit of this broader conversation, are based on a really, really dark, ancient, evil force. And the things that manifest this darkness in this realm can only come from pure evil. Like a lot of times over the years, I've asked, what manifests evil? And my only resolution and conviction is that it's coming from this other realm, and it's manifesting in us to create chaos and disorder and fear and stress and separation and sorrow, because they feed off of our energy. Years ago, there was this concept that was being presented by a few researchers about the archons, and the idea that they were this ancient dark force that would latch onto your body conscious like some kind of succubus energy, and they could manifest. Some of the larger controllers in the ancient bloodlines would basically take over these, the elite circles and stuff are actually controlled maybe by this dark energy, and it's manifesting all these activities in this chessboard. So all these super evil, diabolical psychopaths at the helm probably have a dark entity or some kind of energy field from this ancient army of darkness that are latched onto them. And it's in that context that you cannot feed them with fear and with pain and with sorrow. You have to rise above and be a warrior and be like, I've had trauma. I've experienced trauma. And that trauma that was gifted to me so that I could not be scared to fight for truth and to fight for love and to give us hope for humanity. And I think that that's one of the things that's so powerful about the antithesis or the healing or the antidote for hope at this time, is that we all have to rise up and go to the front lines and be brave and have courage and speak our truth, but speak your truth from a place of love. Resonate in your heart chakra, resonate in your crown, resonate in logos, channel that kundalini energy from the creator and go up against the darkness with no fear. And I think that's kind of where I'm at. I've had a pretty intense amazing life. I'm almost 50 and to be 50 next year. I'm not as afraid to die because I've lived a pretty intense, heroic, joyful, tragic, life. And
Yeah.
but I can't imagine, and I don't mind dying. Like, I actually believe I want to die with love in my heart and with truth,
Yeah.
in my sword, and with, love in my shield. And I know when I die, I'm going to go back to the source.
Yeah.
But for a young person, it's hard because I think young people are going to feel cheated. Like, I haven't even lived my life. I haven't even had a family. I don't know what it's like to have a beautiful lover, and to raise kids, and to have a family, and to make art, and to be a poet and musician and a carpenter and a philosopher and a mystic. Like, I don't, I want to experience that. It's not fair that we have to deal with this threat. And with young people, I don't know what to say, because the writing on the wall looks really bleak. It looks pretty dark. This police state is coming very fast, and this technocratic lockdown, and this Internet of Things, and the rise of AI, and this weaponized Wi-Fi technology that's being booted up on every street corner really reminds me and is reminiscent of the Tartaria narrative. The Tartarian conversation is this traumatic, kind of sad but glorious unveiling or de-occulting idea that only 150 to 200 years ago, the entire northern hemisphere was based on was literally completely covered, the entire northern hemisphere, all of North America, northern South America, all the way through Europe and Russia, all the way to the Orient and stuff. This beautiful Tartarian culture that had this universal architecture, this Greco-Roman architecture, for lack of a better word, and built this unbelievable cities with star forts and these cymatic resonant structures with antiquitech all over them, and appear to have been extracting energy from the ether. And they were all overwhelmingly built with really huge doors and huge rooms to suggest that they were maybe built by people with a larger physique than us, the AKA giants narrative that the Smithsonian Institute covered up and suppressed, in the turn of the century. And that only 150 to 200 years ago was this beautiful Tartarian empire that was somehow taken down with this anomalous mud flood
Event
that appears to have covered all of these buildings with like 9 to 15 feet of soil and some kind of effect with liquefaction. And we're not really sure if it was a natural event connected to solar resets with the solar minimum that some people are talking about now, that recycles every 200 to 400 years, or if it was a weaponized directed energy weapon that caused the liquefaction or the earthquakes, the vibration that caused all that earth to like turn to liquid, to flood through all these cities. And then the idea is this: the mud flood phenomenon overwhelmingly suggests that there was a cover-up of some traumatic natural disaster of earth turning to liquid and flooding the bases of all these beautiful old buildings. And that in that, whatever happened, Tartaria was taken down, and all the giants were decimated, the whole culture was wiped out, and we're living on the carcass of the Tartarian Empire. Literally everywhere you go, you see stunning mud flood evidence, and you see stunning Greco-Roman buildings. Okay, here's the general thing. If you initially thought that all those beautiful old buildings were built by Freemasons, they weren't. They already existed. They were built by Tartaria. And that here we are now being brainwashed to think that the fucking Freemasons built them, and that they spun this entirely convoluted, complex, fake fiction around our historical timeline which goes into Anatoly Fomenko's work with History, Fact, or Fiction, which suggests that, that 1,000 years of fake history was added to the timeline, and there's all these anomalies with all the primary research, and there's all this, that kind of opened up the floodgates to suggest that history was fabricated and faked. And if you actually dig down into the primary documents, it's basically all facsimiles written by Jesuit priests that were probably charged to write a fake narrative about the culture they just destroyed as they reboot and create this postmodern nightmare that we're involved in right now.